It's my pleasure to be able to talk to you today and give a little bit more information about the nutrition pillar of the IDF strategy refresh and give you a little bit more detail about that terrific nutrition story that Brian referenced. When we look at the role that IDF primarily has around nutrition, we see here very simply that IDF proactively supports science-based nutrition policies to ensure that dairy is an integral part of the diet for a span of age groups and contributing to closing the nutritional gap. Science-based is really the key here. Unfortunately, in some circles, when we have debate and dialogue about food and nutrition policy, those discussions are fueled by misperceptions, misinformation, emotions, and sometimes personal agendas. What we need to do is bring those discussions back to a science base. That needs to be the foundation, and it's been IDF's foundation since its inception. So how do we fulfill that role for nutrition? We identified 3 overarching goals to guide the work under the nutrition area. Specifically assembling science-based evidence for the critical role of dairy. And here it's a matter of compiling and consolidating the science. And I have to tell you, the good news here is that there is an abundant body of robust research that really validates and confirms dairy's health benefits. Proactively working and engaging with policymakers, recognizing that we really need to communicate and amplify that robust evidence base. And finally, making or raising awareness, and I'd say acceptance among key IGOs and influencers of the science supporting milk and dairy as essential parts of sustainable, healthy diet patterns. Nutrition is very high on the radar of a number of international groups, UN agencies, and various governments. Internationally, we're looking at improved food systems to support optimal health and to address malnutrition. So topics such as nutrition, food systems, agricultural practices are high on the radar. And on this slide, you just see a sampling of some recent conferences, reports, and publications that have come out in this area. Clearly, it's critically relevant to the work IDF pursues. We also see on a national front that nutrition is highly visible. Here I've just put an array of various countries from Europe to Asia to the Americas who are reviewing and in many cases revising the dietary guidance they have for what healthy diet patterns could be. So the bottom line is nutrition is just high on people's radar. We were charged for the 2016 to 18 operational plan to identify key priorities within the nutrition arena that would drive the work that we do and that would provide a focus. And these are the 3 areas that we identified. Promoting the dairy matrix, supporting optimal health. And here we're looking not only to the individual nutrients and components of foods that convey health benefits, but also the synergistic effects of that package of nutrients within dairy products. Engage in, explain, and promote the interface between nutrition and sustainability. You saw this also that Brian mentioned it, and so it's a joint effort priority area that we have with the sustainability sector. And finally, promoting the important role of the dairy sector in reducing undernutrition and micronutrient deficiency. So these priority areas become really the filter or the checklist by which we gauge the work that we undertake. In reality, much of the work that we've been doing around nutrition within IDF for the last few years has already been driven by these priorities. So we're really very much in alignment with that strategy refresh. I'm going to share just a few examples of some of the accomplishments of the recent year and our plans for moving forward in 2016. So if we look at the priority area for the dairy matrix, a common outcome we have for those strategies is providing positive messaging about the beneficial nutrients in dairy. You see an example here of an infographic that does a very nice job of highlighting the nutritional benefits and the nutritional package of dairy. In many cases, it's IDF and IDF member groups that are pulling these kind of resources together. What I like about this example is that this was actually created by FAO. So having a group of that caliber and credibility expanding and amplifying the positive dairy story is a real plus. In some occasions, we have to defend attacks on select nutrients, and I'm sure you're all aware that in recent years, saturated fat has been a target. IDF in recent years has expended a lot of energies and focus on reframing the perception of saturated fat in the diet, and we've done that, I think, successfully, working collaboratively with other like-minded groups, specifically Global Dairy Platform as an example. And then always we're looking to amplify that science base and speak with one unified voice. Just an example of something we put out this past year that supports that dairy matrix is a fact sheet on trans fatty acids and the need to differentiate between those that are naturally occurring, such as in ruminant trans fatty acids, versus those that are industrially produced. So these kinds of resources are made available. They're put up on the IDF website and are utilized by member countries as well as IDF representatives and staff when we're dealing with those key influencers and IGOs. Nutrition and sustainability. Brian set a very nice stage for the really importance that this issue has in our efforts. The United Nations actually next week will be issuing a Sustainable Development Goals for 2015. And on the screen there you see that in particular one goal number 2, has to do with ending hunger, achieving food security and improved nutrition, and promoting sustainable agriculture, all definitely within the wheelhouse of IDF in terms of issues that we care about and work on. Unfortunately, a lot of the dialogue currently around sustainable diets is very short-sighted and narrow in its focus. And in many cases, when sustainable diets are being described, they're being described only from an environmental standpoint. So you hear a simplistic mantra like, eat more plant foods, eat fewer animal foods. Well, not only is that short-sighted, it's very inaccurate, and it doesn't look at the whole scope of sustainability. So it really falls, I think, to the dairy sector to build the case that sustainability needs to be considered from a broader perspective, looking not just at the environment, but at the nutrition, at social impacts, at economic considerations. And I think, again, we're in a good place to build the case that dairy not only can be part of sustainable food systems, but that they must be. Again, this past year, we issued a fact sheet, this one on the role of dairy in sustainable nutrition, another example of assembling some of the science and then using this as we go out and interact with influencers and gatekeepers. And again, I know this has been used by multiple individual countries and members as well as IDF staff. Under nutrition and micronutrient deficiency, you can see by those statistics that this is still absolutely an issue of monumental importance. It's high on the agenda of many international groups. And one point I'd make is that when we talk under nutrition, we're not only discussing this in developing countries. Undernutrition is an issue in developed countries as well. We have a phenomenon, even though we have an obesity epidemic in several Western or developed countries, we have individuals who are overfed but undernourished. So it's an issue that crosses really socioeconomic categories. I'm very pleased to point out this accomplishment. This is pretty hot off the press. This is an IDF bulletin, the contribution of school milk programs to the nutrition of children worldwide. It summarizes the results of a global survey on school milk programs that we conducted in the past year. This was a joint effort with IDF and FAO, and actually with support from Tetra Laval. And it's the largest survey of its kind probably in the past 15 or 18 years. We gathered data from 57 different countries. And I can tell you as a bottom line, 140 million children globally are benefiting from school milk programs, so making a distinct difference in this issue of undernutrition for children. I encourage you to access the bulletin through the IDF website, maybe reference some of the findings on September 30th, which is World School Milk Day. So what are we going to do moving forward into the 2016 operational year? I'm going to share again just a sampling of 4 strategies, 3 of which are among the 6 priority strategies we have for IDF. I felt I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that next month, IDF will be sponsoring a panel presentation at the 12th European Nutrition Conference in Berlin. This is going to be an assembling of 4 internationally recognized researchers who are going to be discussing regular fat dairy foods in nutrition and health, the latest insights. And what they'll be able to share is some of the positive impacts of dairy fats in the diet as validated by recent research. We are awaiting, we have an action team and staff ready and waiting for the release of the World Health Organization guidelines for saturated and trans fatty acids. So we have our facts and our figures and our research in place. Depending on what those guidelines are, we might be endorsing some of their recommendations if they acknowledge some of the recent research that shows that saturated fats can be part of a healthy diet. If the recommendations come out with some of the more dated research that put restrictions and limitations on saturated fat, we might contest some of that. So depending on how the guidelines come out, we'll be ready to respond. Updating the IDF bulletin regarding the nitrogen conversion factor for Codex standards. This is something we'll be doing with the standards group. Ideally, what we're doing here is preserving the distinction that dairy foods have because of the quality of protein that they provide. The final strategy in my final minute is that we will be launching a nutrition initiative, which is really going to be a compilation of multiple programs that the dairy sector supports or enables that reach into communities and really make a difference by promoting healthier food choices, be that through education programs, food access programs. So we'll be compiling that data and those case studies and making that available to our members as well as sharing it with stakeholders. So that's a snapshot of what's going on in nutrition, and I thank you for your time.